three solid issues, and they all fit really nicely under that umbrella of making the tough choices, because all three are difficult. So, very good message. So now I'm advising Paul's campaign. And when he puts that message together, absent an opponent in the kind of vacuum we're talking about, excellent message. So let's say I say to Paul, here's what I've learned about our opponent. I learned that our opponent is framing her message as someone up from the streets. Yeah, a high school dropout, made her way up in societies, fought her way up. Paul, listen, I know that I know that they're excellent credentials, but I worry that in this race, your background in London, in Paris, and where else? Cambridge? Might be perceived by the voters in our community as a mere opposite disadvantage, rather than an advantage. And so, why don't we take that out of the biography? Now, in other communities, in other messaging, it's a mere opposite advantage, because it points to phenomenal credentials. And so I'm not suggesting across the board it's the wrong one. I'm just creating an example on how we adapt the message for a particular audience.
You're gonna ask for a birth certificate.
I'm sorry?
You're gonna end up asking for a birth certificate.
You're gonna end up asking for his birth certificate. But Paul, I got to tell you, the fact that your mother was a teacher, your role in Teach for America, your role in Green Dot, the creation of charter schools, let's double down on it. Let's spend even more time on that, because our opponent doesn't have a lot of background in education. She's really well known in the community, she's very well respected, but she hasn't taught, she hasn't been involved in education reform, so that's a mere opposite advantage for you. So let's stress that, and let's take out the potential mere opposite disadvantage. Then we look at the issues. I say that's excellent. Accountability, that works really well. College preparation works very well as well. However, our opponent's also calling for expanded school choice. It's not a mere opposite disadvantage, but it's not an advantage. So maybe, you've talked about providing for a longer school day in order to keep kids off the streets in the afternoon. She's against that. We've done, we've talked to some of the local interest groups. We've done some canvassing. People like this idea, Paul. I know that issue might not be as important to you as school choice, but for your primary message, that's a mere opposite advantage. So what do you take out something that's a neutral and replace it with something that's an advantage? So you see what I'm doing here? The first iteration of the message is all about you. But then, once you've done the research on your own candidate, on your opponent, you take out the negatives, even to the extent you can, the ciphers, and you pack that message until it is overflowing with mere opposite advantages. So, all the way in the back, and remind me of your name?
First name is Eric.
Eric, I remember you telling me that this is something that
we're working on the re-election messaging. Can I run two ideas by you first in terms of the I'm running because statement? Or should I go through the whole thing? I feel like each statement sort of leads in a different direction. So one of the phrases we used last time, was putting neighbor back into neighborhood. So I don't know if I want to continue with that. It's easier with just a slogan as opposed to I'm running because I want to put neighbor back into neighborhood. The other one I'm toying with is I'm running to put Delray on the map. One of the sort of inside jokes in Delray is no one knows they're in Delray. They assume it's Marina Del Rey, or it's Culver City, or it's this or that. And so it's actually older than all those places I just mentioned. So this idea of putting it on the map.
Let me ask you this then, Eric. What are your three issues?
Dogs?
Because to me, and what we talked about last week, is establishing a rationale and theme and then the issues under them. Sometimes candidates, even really smart ones, have difficulty developing a rationale because it's language, and it's what you're going through right here. Which one makes the most sense? So sometimes it makes sense to do it in reverse. Decide what the three issues are that are most important to you, and then think about the unifying theme. These are my three issues. What's an umbrella I can construct that encompasses all three of them? So what are your three issues?
The three issues are dogs, kids, and trees.
You're in favor of all three of them, I guess? Okay, because that could be a really serious opposite disadvantage.
I'm hoping
my candidate loves dogs, and you're opposite.
Cats and adults and bushes.
pro dogs, pro kids, pro trees. And what we'd probably do is I'd ask you to go a little bit deeper in what it is that you intend to accomplish in each of those
Right,
areas.
so I think dogs hits 2 points. One is safety on the street, so being able to walk your dog.
Mhm.
Maybe that gets to, that raise a safe place on the map, or maybe it gets back into you're walking, you're out and about, so you're a neighbor, a person in your neighborhood.
Well, let's go through all three of those.
Okay.
Safety for dogs, and what's your other dog?
So there's actually a renovated park in Delray now, and actually one of the issues that gets the most traction is there a way to make it an official dog park? So right now it's unofficial, and there's a really beautiful new playground, and so kids and families have actually complained a little bit that off-leash dogs are causing trouble, so it's sort of the classic,
So,
can
and
we
I
balance
imagine
all
this
these
park is part of your kids'
Yeah.
agenda also.
goes into that. And then I think kids works well with schools. I know a lot of the schools, I'm obviously a former teacher, so that's an easy in. So kids to me is more schools, but it could be a lot of other things too.
Okay, be careful on trees. You know, the mayor ran for elections talking about, planting 1 million trees. I've tried to explain to Mayor Vidarugosa that if he just says that what he meant to say was 1 million leaves, he's already accomplished that.
Right, so we planted 39 trees, and we're very proud of it. But I think I'm trying to, very proud of these trees. Because I think it highlights in my 2 years on the board, I think one of the most visible successes we've had. We had this walking path on the street that looked crappy before, now it's got 39 new trees, and we have plans for more.
I would offer you this thought. I think they're both good rationales, Eric.
Okay.
I think you're running for a second term, correct?
Right.
One is a better rationale for an incumbent, and one is a better rationale for a challenger. Can you read them both aloud again?
Okay. Running to put the power of neighbor back into our neighborhood. Second one is I'm running to put Delray on the map.
Anybody have any thoughts on which one works better for a challenger and which one works better for an incumbent? You a
The,
dollar guy?
the putting the neighbor back in the neighborhood would be for a challenger, because it implies that he hasn't done that during his first term.
And putting Delray on the map, you think works better for an incumbent? Let me offer a slight twist on Eric's message, on either one of those rationales. I'm running for council because I want to put Delray on the map. I'm running for council because I want to continue the work we've done to put the neighbor back in neighborhoods. Harder to do that with the map. You can't really continue putting something on the map. It's either there or it's not. But continue putting the neighbor in neighborhoods is building on a past success. And so, Eric, I would say that if you were a challenger, either one of those could work. But as an incumbent, what you want to stress is continuity and continued progress. You've begun putting the neighbor back in neighborhood. You want to continue it.
I really like that map idea, but I don't know. See the shirts and the branding would have been great. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
I can see that if you continue, then the ultimate outcome is you will have put Delray on the map. Like I can see it more like that's gonna be like what he'll be known for after 2
Maybe
terms.
in the closing stump speech, you throw something out like we
Yeah.
come so far now, people will know.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You know, when I first ran for city council, my goal was to put Delray on the map. And so the way we're going to do that is by parks and kids and dogs and trees and things. I've spent the last 2 years doing everything I can to put the neighbor back in the neighborhood. And I'm going to finish that job so we can put Delray on the map. So, now, Eric is running against a challenger. And the challenger, well, we didn't really hear much about your biography, Eric. You're an incumbent. What else should we know?
Grew up in Houston, Texas, 5 minutes from NASA, and always loved space and the idea of possibility. Had a great two-parent home growing up with a wonderful dog and public school all the way through. The most important decision in my life was deciding to teach 4th and 5th grade in the great city of Compton. And I will forever consider myself lucky to have done it, and an educator in all things that I do.
I see Paul actually signing up to run the campaign against you.
Oh, nice.
suspect what he's thinking, because he had to shed Paris and Cambridge out of his biography, is he's gonna make you rue the day that you mentioned Houston.
I have Cambridge in my biography. That's get rid of
You
Houston
too
by
are
first
running
name.
against someone, from this community. You're running against someone, who was born and raised in Delray. And so being born in Houston isn't a bad thing. But saying, Eric, let's emphasize the educator even more.
Should I say I grew up 5 minutes from NASA and not necessarily say where that was?
Plus, NASA's an acronym.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even know the acronym. Rich man.
Well, this depends on your opponent. If your opponent was born in Delray, then that's something I'd suggest that you not have the part of your biography emphasize. But if your opponent came from another part of the country too, then by all means emphasize it. Because when I grew up in Houston, I grew up 5 minutes from NASA, and I used to think about what we could do to change the world. I used to think about going to the moon and about the first man on Mars and so on. What I finally learned is the most important change we can make is not on the moon, not on another planet, it's right here in this community. But if your opponent's from the neighborhood, then all you do is emphasizing your opposite disadvantage.
Is there a way to say, right, with the idea of the moon and space as opportunity, what better place really is, what lifts up opportunity more than California specifically?
I would say, since we're making up your opponent anyway,
Okay,
I would say that if your opponent is from Delray,
right,
I'd say let's drop the whole Houston NASA moon thing
okay.
and emphasize things that speak to your ties to this community.
Okay.
Similarly, let's say for the sake of argument that your opponent agrees with you on all three of these issues, okay? But even though it's not quite as central to your core, you've put in a lot of time to encourage walking and biking in the community, and to discourage driving, and that's something that's very popular. I'd say, hey, Eric, listen, you got a mere opposite advantage on this issue. It's not like you got negatives on these other ones, but let's pick something that creates a clear-cut advantage for you. I'm not asking you to change your position. I'm not asking you to ignore something that's important to you. But I'm just saying, in terms of that first interaction with a voter or voter group or with the community, let's find as many mere opposite advantages as we can. Now, you might have mere opposite advantages on these issues. Your opponent is pro-dog too. But what has he ever done about dogs? You've done this, the whole safety thing for dogs. You've worked to create a park for dogs. So even though you have the same position on the issue, you have biographical credibility, and that creates a mere opposite advantage. On the flip side, let's say that you promised to plant 1 million trees. You only planted 39. Well, your opponent is pro-tree too, but that's a mere opposite disadvantage because there's something on which he can criticize you. So once again, you take that original message that comes from in here, and then you don't reject it, you don't abandon it. You simply improve it. To not only talk about the things that are most important to you in your biography and your policy agenda, but to emphasize those things that give the voters the most considered choice between you.
And then last thing, and how do you handle, because there's now 2 years of community voting on things and a record that I want to run, in most cases I'm happy and pleased with the things that I accomplished and the board accomplished, but if somebody was carrying the challenger mantle and was trying to paint those experiences as a negative, what do you feel like, or what's the right level to say, we've accomplished a lot, done a lot of things, versus...
Experience.